guys, so this session is on solving equations that involves 3 steps. So for our first equation, we have to solve this, and we know when a question asks us to solve an equation, it means x has to be by itself, okay? X wants to be alone, and that's when it's happy. So if you have a look at this equation here, you notice there's 3 different numbers, or 3 numbers annoying the x. There's a 2 up here, a 5 down there, and another 2 over here. And we have to know, to do this, we have learned all the skills we need to know to solve this. It's just knowing which one goes first, second, and then third. So you can actually see how many steps are involved by how many numbers there are next on the same side of the x. So the best way to remember which one goes first is the number that is furthest away from the x. So in this case, out of the 2 up here, the 5, and the 2 over here, which one looks like it's the furthest away? We can actually see that this positive 2 here is going to be the first one to go. It's the furthest away. And then once that's gone, we have a 2 here, above here, and a 5. Out of that 2 and that 5, which one's the furthest away? Well, you can see that the 5 would go next, so it's the second one to go. 5 is on the bottom, whereas this 2 up here is actually joined to the x by times, and it's above the vinculum. So that would be the third number to go. So if it helps, you can number your values and to know which one goes first, second, and then third. So now, to get rid of this positive 2, we have to minus 2 and then minus 2 on this side. Now, we know that when solving equations, you are to do one thing at a time. So we can show clear working out. So that 2 is gone. We know that's a 0 here. We don't have to write a 0 here because 0 means nothing. So we end up with 2x divided by 5 is equal to 6 minus 2 is 4. Okay, so now we know that the 5 is going to be the next thing to go. So the opposite of dividing by 5 is to times by a 5. Yes, we know that 5 is positive, but we don't subtract 5 because that 5 is attached to the x by division. And the opposite of dividing by 5 is to times by 5. Cross it off straight away, and then make sure you times by 5 on this side, because what you do to one side, you must do to the other. So what's left on this side? We've got 2x equals 4 times 5 is 20. X is almost by itself. The third thing to go is this 2 here. Yes, it's a positive 2, but that positive 2 is joined to the x by times. And the opposite of times is to divide by 2. And cross it off straight away, and then divide by 2 on this side. And finally, we end up with x by itself will equal to 20 divided by 2 is 10. And we have solved our equation. We can say we have found the answer, or we can say we have found the solution. And now it's important to check. Okay, we can do this showing working out, or we can do it mentally. Sometimes a question may actually ask you to check, so that's where you can show some working out. But to check mentally, all we're going to do is, we know this equation is saying, if I just write this out so it's a bit more clear. So there's our original equation. It is saying 2 times a number, which is x at this stage, divided by 5 plus 2 to give us 6. We have worked it out that the number is 10. And to make sure it is 10, let's see if we put 10, if we substitute 10 for x here, okay, and we get 6, if it equals 6, then we've done the right thing. Let's check it. So 2 times, instead of x now, 2 times 10 is 20. Then 20 divided by 5 is 4. And then 4 plus 2 is 6. So yes, we got it. We would end up with 6 equals 6. That's a true statement. So we have done the correct thing. So with our next equation, it's the exact same one as what we had before. It'll involve the same steps, just that we have different values. So x will maybe a different number. So try and do this one by yourself. If you get stuck, just continue watching. So our first step will be to get rid of this negative 1. And then a second step will be to get rid of that 2. And our third step is that 7. Okay, so the opposite of minus 1 is to plus 1. It's going to be a 0, cancels out, but we must plus 1 on this side here. So we have 7x over 2, or divided by 2, equals 6 plus 1 is 7. All right, our next step is to get rid of that 2 on the bottom. We know we are dividing by a positive 2, so we times by a positive 2. That cancels out, and we times by a 2 on this side. And then what's left is a 7x equals 7 times 2 is 14. And finally, that 7 has to go. And that 7 is a positive 7, but it's joined to the x by times. So we don't go minus 7, we go divide by a positive 7. That cancels out. And divide by a 7 here. And finally, x will equal 14 divided by 7 is 2. And do your check. If x is 2, sub it back into the original question just to make sure you haven't made a mistake. So 7 times 2 is 14. And then 14 divided by 2 is 7. And 7 minus 1, yes, it's 6. So we have done the correct thing. Now, with question 3, this equation, you can see how it looks different to the other equations compared to what you have written down. And you notice that the plus 1 here is actually above the vinculum. With the other equations, we had something like this. 2 times x divided by 3, just say, and then plus 1 equaled something. Okay? You notice how with the other questions, the plus 1 was sitting here by itself, or whatever the number was. But with this one, the number on its own is actually above the vinculum. So it's actually different to the other questions. And you need to make sure you take note of that, because now, which one looks like it is the furthest away from the x? Which one is not on the same level, but furthest away? You can see that the first number to go will be this 3 here. That 3 for this question is now the furthest away, because that 1 is above the vinculum. This here is actually saying, you ready? Using your fraction skills, we can separate these, the 2x and the 1. It is actually saying 2x over 3 plus 1 over 3. When we add fractions, we know that if we, for example, didn't have an x here, and you were asked to add these, well, you would know the answer will be the denominator stays the same, and then 2 plus 1 would just be 3. And then you can simplify that. So if they have the same denominator, you can write them under the same denominator. Or, showing more working out, we could have done this. 2 plus 1 over the same denominator is 3. And then 2 plus 1 is just 3 over 3. If you remember showing this extra step, if they have the same denominator, you can write them under the same denominator. And that is what we have up here. We have 2x plus 1 over 3. Now, we can't add the 2x plus 1, can we? Because, unfortunately, we've got an x here. And 2x plus 1, we know, using our algebra skills, 2x plus 1 is just going to be 2x plus 1. There's nothing we can do. So that's why you need to be very careful. This plus 1 is not the furthest away. It's on the same level as the 2x. So the 3 must go first. And then after the 3, once the 3 is gone, you will have 2x plus 1. And then you know how to do this next step. The second number to go will be the 1. That will be the next thing that's furthest away. And finally, that 2 will be the last thing to go. So if it helps, just number them. Now let's write out this question again, the equation again, so we can see the original one quite clearly. So let's follow those steps. Now, with this 3 down here, it's a positive 3, but we know this 3 is joined to the x by, this symbol means division. So the opposite of dividing by 3 is to times by 3. And we must times by 3 on this side also. Now this, see how we're multiplying by 3? Please don't go 1 times 3 is 3. That would be a big mistake. Just cross it off straight away. A 3 on top and a 3 in the bottom, we cancel it out. That's why we're doing this. And then we write down what is left. 2x plus 1 is what's left. The 3 is now gone. Please don't write this. Don't write it over 1. Because there's no need to do that. We know anything over 1, that 1 is actually invisible. Alright, just keep that in mind. And then we have equals 3 times 3 is 9 on this side. Now, we know how to solve these ones. This now involves just 2 steps. And we know that plus 1 is next to go. It's the furthest away now. And so opposite of plus 1 is to minus 1. That cancels out to become 0, but we must minus 1 on that side. So what is left? We end up with 2x equals 9 minus 1 is 8. Now we are almost there. That x is almost by itself. This 2 now has to go. And that 2 is a positive 2. And the opposite of positive 2 is is minus 2, but we know that positive 2 is joined to the x by a times. So we must now divide by a positive 2, that cancels out, and divide by a positive 2 on that side. And finally, we will have x equals 8 divided by 2 is equal to 4. Now, please, with your working out, make sure there is one equal sign per line, and every step I want you to make sure you start a new line. I just had to squeeze this up here because there was no room on the bottom. And now let's do our check to make sure that we have the correct solution, the correct answer. If x is 4, so up here, if x is actually 4, we would have 2 times 4. And then let's see what we get. So 2 times 4 is 8, and then 8 plus 1 is 9, and then 9 divided by the 3 gives us 3. So yes, that is our correct answer. So with this fourth question, try and have a go and do it on your own first, and if you get stuck, just follow. But this involves the exact same steps as the previous question. We know this 7 is the furthest away from the x because this minus 4 is on the same level as the x. So the 7 must go first. Okay, and then we know the 4 will go next, and then the 5. So opposite of dividing by 7, we know this 7 is attached to the x by division, is 2 times by 7. Cross it off straight away and times by 7 on this side. Let's rewrite what we have left. So we end up with 5x minus 4 equals 3 times 7 is 21. Okay, next to go will be that minus 4, and this minus 4 is not attached to the x by division or multiplication, so the opposite of minus 4 or take away 4 is to plus 4. That cancels out, and we must plus 4 on that side. Okay, so we end up with 5x is now left on this side equals 21 plus 4, that is just 25. And then our final step, that 5x, we know it's saying 5 times x, so the opposite of 5 times is to divide by 5. That cancels out, and divide by 5 on this side. And finally, we end up with x equals 25 divided by 5 is 5. And that's our answer. And let's now check and verify if our answer is correct. So if x is 5, let's use substitution. If x is 5, so we would have 5 times 5, which is 25, and then 25 minus 4, 25 minus 4 is 21, and 21 divided by this 7 gives us 3. So yes, our answer is correct. Okay, so what I want you to do now is to try these two questions, okay? And we have covered these two types of questions. It's just that we have different numbers in there. And just follow the exact same steps as what we did before. Remember, always pick the number that's furthest away from the x. And you can see how the first one is different to the second one, where this 8 is not on top of the vinculum, so it's separate. But this 3 here, this plus 3, is above the vinculum. So don't forget that. And I want you to verify your solutions, your answers, by then subbing it in to the value of x to see if you get the answer on this side here. Okay? Now, with this equation here, sometimes equations, you can actually simplify something in the equation before starting to solve it. So this one here does involve 3 steps, because you notice that you got a 2 here and a plus 1. So the first thing you would do is to simplify this bit here. What is 2 plus 1? 2 plus 1 is just 3. So we would have 2x, a positive 3, so plus 3 equals 13. So that was our first step. And then we simply solve this as you normally would. What goes next? We know this plus 3 goes next. It's the furthest away now. That cancels out. The opposite is to minus 3 and minus 3 on that side. So we would have 2x equals 13 minus 3 is 10. And of course, we then divide by 2. That cancels out. And then divide by 2. And finally, we would have x equals 10 divided by 2 is 5. Okay, and then verify your answer. If x is 5, we would have 2 times 5, which is 10. And then 10 plus 2 is 12. And 12 plus 1 is 13. So yes, we are correct. Okay, with our next equation, this involves three steps, because you notice that on this side here, we have 2 plus 4. So whenever you see this, if you can add them together and simplify, do that first. So our first step is to add these together, and 2 plus 4 is just 6. So we then end up having 8x over 4 equals 6. And now we know what to do. The next thing to go is the 4 here. 4 is the furthest away, and the opposite of dividing by 4 is to times by 4. And that cancels out, and times by 4 on this side. So we end up with 8x equals 6 times 4 is 24. And finally, that 8 is next to go, and we know that 8 is joined to the x by times, so we divide by 8, that cancels out, divide by 8, so we end up with x equals 24 divided by 8 is 3. And we can use now substitution to check and see if our answer is correct. If x is 3 up here, we would have 8 times 3, okay, which is 24, and 24 divided by 4 is 6, because we know 2 plus 4 is 6. So yes, we have the correct answer. So just keep practicing, and thank you for watching.